Hello, my name is Dr. Joseph Crumbly. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and family therapist, and I'll be talking to you today about the topic of hope and denial. This topic is one of a three-part series developed specifically for kinship caregivers, and the title of the course is Coping with the Unique Challenges of Kinship Care. You're now about to see a videotape of me presenting to an audience of caregivers in which I'll be addressing two goals. The first goal will be to understand what are the cues and sources of hope and denial experienced by caregivers. The second goal is to talk about what are the goals, approaches, and responses that you might be able to use as a caregiver in managing and coping with your hope or denial. I have two questions for the viewing audience that I'd like you to address while you're watching this video. The first question is, do my hopes impact my ability to protect, provide permanency, and provide well-being for the children in my care? And the second question is, what are the goals, approaches, and responses that'll be useful to me as a caregiver in managing and coping with my hopes and denial? So please sit back, relax, and I'll rejoin you at the conclusion of this videotape to summarize the presentation. Thank you. Hope and denial. I'd like to start by really asking you a question. What does hope do for you and give you as a caregiver? And if you could just give me one or two word answers to that question, right off the top of your head, what does it do for you? Yes? Inspire. Yes. Optimism. Yes. Encouragement. Anticipation. Ability? Anyone else? Strength. Yes. Peace. Healing. And I have to include a comment earlier. Could you say that again? Expectations of something to come that is not perceived by the senses. So let me summarize. Motivation, determination, faith, commitment, direction, focus, inspiration, healing, and expectations of what's coming that's not perceived by the senses. Now I'm going to ask you another strange question. And this may sound very strange, but when is hope a problem? And when does hope become denial? And by denial, I'm talking about not being able to accept the truth, not being able to accept what's real. So my question to you is, when does hope become a problem or denial? Yes, ma'am. Resistance to the obvious. Problem or denial? When? What else? Discouragement. Uncertainty. Yeah, that's when you know you're starting to avoid it. Avoiding the pain of asking those questions? Yes. Confusion. Okay. Yes, ma'am. When you are enabling, that's the biggest one. When you're enabling, and I loved what you just said, and when you don't want to face it. So let me summarize some of the things you just said. When you're unable to plan for the worst, unable to see or accept the problem or the situation, when you ignore the warning signs, when things are happening over and over and over again, and your hope doesn't allow you to see the warning signs, and it just keeps you hopeful. Ignoring, excusing the warning signs, avoid disappointment by not admitting or accepting the situation. Sometimes you want to stay hopeful so that you don't have to deal with the pain. Sometimes you want to stay hopeful so that you don't have to deal with the disappointments. Making excuses to avoid the disappointments, that's the part when it becomes enabling. You're avoiding it, you don't want to deal with the disappointments, and your hope ends up enabling the person to not have to change. Avoid confronting the source of the problem. What's the source of the problem sometimes? The birth parent. Yeah. So sometimes avoiding the source of the problem means avoiding having to confront the birth parent. And then the last one, avoid preparing others for the disappointment. Who's this other I'm talking about? The children. right? You're willing to deal with the pain. You're willing to deal with the disappointments, but you don't want to have to see their pain and disappointments, so you don't deal with it. You just stay hopeful, and it becomes a problem when you let who stay hopeful? The children. That's the biggest problem with avoiding. That's when hope and denial is a setup and becomes a problem, because not dealing with the hope, not dealing with the disappointments allows the children to continue to hope. Some sources of hope for you. Parents and the child's reunification, they're going back home. That's got to be a big source of hope, that they're going to get it together, that they're going to go back home. But that can become a source of denial and a problem when what? When they don't do it and you don't make what? Plans. That's how hope can become a problem. That's how hope can become denial, where you're so hopeful till you avoid making the plans. Expecting the birth parent to accomplish requirements for reunification, that's a hope that they're going to get it together. But then how does it become a problem? How does it become denial? When they don't do what they're supposed to do, and you don't plan for it, and you won't even allow yourself to think about it, because you're so hopeful. I won't think about it, it's not going to happen, so you don't end up doing any planning for yourself or who else? The children. Caregivers hope of resuming and pursuing a previous lifestyle and goal. Now that's a big hope. I'm going to go back to being grandma. I'm going to go back to being aunt. I'm going to go back to being aunt and uncle again. I'm going to go back to retirement, my lifestyle. I'm going to be able to take those trips, the privacy of my house. But when does it become denial? When you don't plan for it, when they don't do it, when you don't plan for it just in case, or when you don't come up with a notice to let them know, hey, this is when it needs to start. When you don't have discussions about when enough is enough. Yeah. Because you don't have to feel as though you have to talk about that, because it's going to happen. Not wanting to appear as a failure or disloyal to the birth parent. Great source of hope, but when does it become a problem? Back to when they don't do what they're supposed to do and when they haven't earned your loyalty. It's when you're not able to place limits on the loyalty. That's when it becomes a problem. Conditions for the loyalty and boundaries for the loyalty. Your loyalty is just boundless. And then the children going back home, that becomes a source of hope. You're looking forward to them being back with their parents. Becomes a problem when the children aren't going back, not doing what they want to do, what's supposed to do, and then not being able to help the children plan for the disappointment. Some cues. I know my son and daughter's going to do it. He'll get it together. She'll get it together this time. That can become denial when you don't talk to them about what? This being the what? The last time. Got to be able to have that conversation too. So it's almost like, yeah, I hope you're going to get it together, and I hope this is the last time too. And having that discussion in there. He couldn't have done this. She couldn't have done this. I didn't raise him or her that way. He told me he didn't do it. How can that become a problem? You're hoping that they didn't do it. When does it become a problem? Not realistic, when you're avoiding the what? The truth. You're not even asking for evidence. I don't mean to turn you into private investigators, but you need some evidence. You need some information. Give me a reason to believe you. That's all you're asking for. Give me the reason. Okay? Not just blind faith. And that has its place. But then when it's just blind faith without any kind of works to go with that, that can become a problem. I'm looking forward to the kids going back to their parents. I don't plan to take care of kids for the rest of my life. Sounds great. That becomes a problem when? When it doesn't happen, and when you're not willing to confront who? There you go. You got to get back to the birth parents. When do you want to get on with your life? What's your timetable? What's your timeline? What do they have to do in order for you to continue hoping? The agency doesn't want my child to get their children back. They don't believe that the children should go back. It's their attitudes that are making my children not cooperate. It's their attitudes that's making my son, my daughter, my brother not cooperate. What's the problem with that? Problem is that they're not following plans, they're not doing what they're doing, and you're making excuses. That's the one. Okay? And these are excuses so that they don't have to what? Do the right thing and try. So that's how your hope, back to that enabling you had mentioned earlier. You don't want your hopes to become enabling. I don't want to crush the children's hope of returning home, especially after the parents have made so many promises. How can that become denial? What's the problem there? Disappointing the children. That's what you're avoiding. Remember, denial is avoiding what's real and avoiding the disappointment and the hurt that goes along with accepting what's real. You see it, you know it, you're not telling the children, so they're set up to keep hoping. Yeah, so the work there is, when am I going to tell the children? When do they need to know? And that last one, I don't want my son to think I've given up on him and to believe the things that they're saying about him. So no, I'm not adopting. What's the problem there? Denial. And putting the birth parents' needs before who? The child. Right. You want that birth parent to feel that you believe them, that you're loyal to them, and you end up putting the needs of the children second. That's when that hope can become a problem. So what do you do about it? First thing is, you've got to be able to put those plans in place even if you don't think that they're necessary. You don't want your hope to stop you from seeing the danger. And that's one of the hardest things, I think, for caregivers to have to do. He's not going to hurt the children, so I shouldn't have to supervise the visit. See how your hope is? I don't have to check his eyes out to see if he's high, because he's not going to do that. I don't have to hold him accountable for being late. He was late this time, but it won't happen again. Okay? So those are the kind of things you avoid. Even though you're seeing it, it's happening, but you don't put the safety plans in. You don't put the visitation plans in. You don't put the supervision plans in. You don't follow through with the restraining orders because you don't see the danger. Okay? And I think it's important that you have to acknowledge it. The second goal is develop concurrent plans. Hope for the best, but plan for what? That's all that means. Know when and how to engage the children in alternative planning. That means avoiding not telling the children what's going on because you don't want to have to deal with their disappointments. The third one, not projecting their hopes or the parents' hopes and promises onto the children. And we're going to talk more about that. And then reinforcing the children of being protected and believed. When the children start disclosing to you what happened to them and what they started to experience, how are you going to make it safe for them to tell you? That's what that's about. So let's talk more about that. First one, here's your script. These are things you may need to have to say to yourself. Your goal, plan for yourself before somebody else plans for you. You got to hope for the best, plan for the worst. So to make sure you do that, here's some conversations that you can have with yourself. Yes, we're family and we should be hopeful, but will our hope stop family court and the agencies from making decisions for the children if we don't? In other words, if you don't plan, someone else is going to plan for who? For you. And plan for who else? Your children. Do we have a backup plan to make sure the children remain in the family just in case they don't return to their birth families? So this is your conversation with your family members. And the last one, which I think is the most important one, is having what I call, if not, then what conversations with yourself. They sound like this. I hope he gets through the rehab program, but if not, then what? I hope he gets that job, but if not, then what? I hope that he can find the housing he's supposed to be getting, but if not, then what? Make sense? It's the if not, it's the hope he does, but it's the if not, then what that makes you plan for just in case. Developing alternative plans. Conversation sounds like this. Well, when will I know it's time to make alternative plans? What activities by the birth parent and my son or daughter will let me know when it's time to plan? In other words, you're using the birth parent's behaviors as direction that tells you what to do. In other words, it's the parent's activity or inactivity that lets you know whether or not you need to plan. That's what it's based on. So rather than you have to when do I plan, you watch the birth parent, you take their lead. But you got to be realistic enough to see if they're doing it or not doing it, okay? How much time and how many chances are the courts going to give them? That's the other thing that's going to make you be realistic. Your patience is boundless, but you got to start thinking like the courts. How many times, how many chances, how long are you going to wait? Not giving children the hopes. Now, this may sound strange. What hopes do I need to keep from the children or share only with friends and adults? How will I help the children recover? The formula here is, well, I'm going to tell you what. The formula is something that I learned from you. How many times have you not told the children that mom and dad were coming over until they're where? There. How many times do you tell the children that that mom and dad are going to call? You don't do it until when? They call. How many times have you avoided telling the children that they were going over for the weekend or going out to the park? You don't do it until when? Until they actually show up. Somebody said, knock on the door. Okay? Exactly. My whole point is, the formula here is, you don't give them the hope unless they can handle the disappointment. So you don't give them the hopes of them showing up. You don't give them the expectations that they're going to be there, because you don't want to give them feelings of frustration that they can't handle and that you can't handle, because then you got to be able to help the children and help them cope with that. So yeah, don't give them what they can't handle. Put those plans in place. Even though you believe they didn't do it, you still have to think about, well, what does the agency think? You may trust them, but the agency is seeing them as what? The problem. Right. You may see them as your son, your daughter, your sister and brother. They're seeing them as what? Adults, clients. So what do I need to do to protect my son and daughter from being accused? It may mean putting in those restraining orders, following you with those safety plans, having those instructions in place, following through with supervising. And the last part to me, which is so important, is what do you need to do to make sure that your children are believed? That might mean not letting your hopes and beliefs about the birth parent stop you from listening and believing the children. It's being able to let the children know that regardless of what you're saying, I believe who? You, exactly. So in summary, hope for the best, but you need to make plans if your hopes aren't going to be reality. Have hope and alternative plans in place. That doesn't mean that you're being disloyal. And make sure that hope doesn't become a problem by you not being able to make alternative plans that are going to keep you safe and the children safe. So thank you so much. Hope you find this useful. Welcome back. I'd like to summarize this presentation by starting off with looking at why you need hope. And if you remember the responses from the caregivers in the audience, they gave you a nice list of why you need hope. It gives you focus, it gives you determination, it gives you purpose, it gives you direction, it gives you its healing. But we also, if you notice, I also asked the question, when does hope become a problem? When does hope become denial? And you heard responses like, when you won't accept what's real, when you're not dealing with the truth, when you're not willing to deal with what's obvious, when you're making excuses, when you're enabling. And the biggest one was when you're not willing to tell the truth to the children and to prepare them for the reality, because you don't want to have to deal with their pain. So that's some of the reasons why. Some of the goals in order to how to handle that is being able to, number one, put those plans in place before somebody else does. Number two, hope for the best so you can plan, and at the same time plan for the worst. Some other strategies that you might want to work on is developing the alternative plans, again, before it happens, to avoid having to be in a crisis. And number two, not projecting hopes on the children. In other words, not giving the children hopes if they can't handle the disappointments. Another third strategy is implementing those safety plans to make the children feel safe, even if you don't think they're necessary. Not ignoring the danger. And even if you don't think the danger is there, still being able to put those plans in place. What we're talking about here is called prevention planning in kinship care. That's what this is all about, prevention planning and safety planning for children. But it starts with you first, being able to look at your hopes, look at your dreams, look at your expectations, and at the same time, being able to remain hopeful, but planning for the worst. in planning for the children in order to keep them safe as well as you. So thank you so much. I hope you find this useful. Keep up the great work that you're doing. Thank you.